It's an important day for the Assembly of First Nations, an emotional day for Indigenous leaders and the families of two murdered women. They've traveled to Ottawa to express their anguish and their outrage as Winnipeg police refuse to search a landfill where the women's remains are believed to be.
The message that you are sending is that our women do not matter. Indigenous women do not matter. And that is a very, very sad statement to make.
We saw this happen with residential schools, and here you are, once again, creating unmarked graves of Indigenous peoples. That's wrong, and it needs to end. Like, I'm angry.
If you can't help us, if you don't feel you are capable of finding these women, then you should step down and give someone else a chance to make the right decision and give us a resolution.
Mercedes Myron and Morgan Harris were killed by an alleged serial killer between May and March, along with Rebecca Contois and another Indigenous woman known only as Buffalo Woman. Evidence suggests the bodies of Harris and Myron are at Prairie Green landfill outside of Winnipeg, but police have not launched a search, arguing too much time has passed and too much garbage has been dumped. The women's families and their First Nation are now calling for the police chief's resignation. Leah Gazan is the NDP MP who represents Winnipeg Centre, and Cambria and Kera Harris are the daughters of Morgan Harris. I'd like to thank you all for coming in and speaking with me today.
Thank you.
Cambria, I'd like to start with you. For people watching at home, what do you want them to know about your mother?
My mother was a very strong and resilient woman, and you know, she lived on the streets most of her life, and she was in and out of homeless shelters and treatment centers, and she fought to survive. And, you know, I feel horrible that she had to leave Earth in the way that she did, because she didn't deserve it and none of it was her fault. Society never gave her a fighting chance, and, you know, she was a beautiful, strong woman. When my mother was pregnant with her last baby, my little brother Gabriel, she went to a medicine woman, even when she was struggling with addiction, to get medicine for the baby in her belly. And my brother Gabriel was born perfectly healthy. He never gets sick, and I think it's amazing. And I think it's because she knows that, you know, we deserve more. And, you know, people need to start realizing that Indigenous people have voices.
Kera, what would you like to say about your mom?
She was a very... Sorry.
Oh, it's okay. Take all the time you need.
She was a very selfless and amazing woman. When she was out on the streets, everyone knew of her name. So it was no surprise when we were looking for her, everyone who was asked a question, they had something to say. Not about her whereabouts, but what she had done for them. Regardless of whether she was sober or not, she was always there to give kindness to people in need of it. She would help everyone she could, regardless of her own situation. What had happened to her was unjust, and the way it's being handled is absolutely horrific. She did not deserve the life that was bestowed upon her. She did her hardest to try and improve herself, to get better for her own children. But the reality was that the government did not have enough resources to help her out. No matter how much she tried and cried for assistance, no one helped her. And she tried and she fought very hard until the very end.
Cambria, you're fighting very hard now for her to be helped. And I'm just wondering, for people who don't understand the timeline as intimately as you do, I mean, how long have you been asking the police to look for your mom?
So she first went missing in May, so there was a CBC News article released saying that she had already been missing for over a month and was last seen at Main Street in Henry. And then so in May, then that's when we did the Walk with Bear Clan patrol, and that's when, you know, we went into all the bad places that we shouldn't have to go into to search for our women. But unfortunately we have to, because we know that they're there somewhere. And so yeah, we did the search and they never stopped looking, and then come September, like, that's when things started getting really serious. And then just last Thursday, we found out that she was a victim of a homicide, as well as 3 other women.
You say September, things started to get really serious. What happened in September that...
So that's when they had taken my blood sample,
For DNA?
For DNA, yeah, so that they could put it into like the missing persons database, which is like across the world, so that if a missing person does show up and your blood matches, it'll pop up so that they'll be able to identify whoever you're related to that's missing. And yeah, I'm kind of mad that it took all the way until September when it should have been done first thing in May when she went missing.
And Kera, I wonder if you can tell us about how the police told you that they weren't going to continue the search for your mother's remains, how that happened.
Well, the first day, we had a meeting with a detective where they called all of our family to inform us of the news. At first, I respected them for letting us know and seeing how much effort they put in to find my mother, to find these women. But the next day or so, they informed us that they weren't going to look for them. And it devastated our family. And that's why we're here today.
How did they tell you just that this landfill in Winnipeg is the likely location?
They found out we were going to Parliament, and they met us at the airport. And they gave me that information that they were in a different landfill. And so I said to them, you know what, be warned, you're going to see what I have to say. And so that's why I'm here today.
Leah Gazan, they brought this to Parliament. You're a member of Parliament, and last night there was this take note debate in the House of Commons. What are you asking the federal government to do on this? What are you hearing from Mark Miller, the Indigenous Relations Minister, on what they may do here?
Well, I mean, there's a few things here. I mean, the National Inquiry came out with 231 calls for action. It's been quite some time yet. Where is that at? Nowhere's land. I put in an order paper question in May at the time of the $724.1 million that they had invested in addressing the issue in 2020. They had only spent $12 million. I think all levels of government need to come together to provide resources for searches for women, whether it be in equipment, whatever it is. They need to listen to families. I think certainly the family and these amazing young warriors, the daughters of Morgan Harris, are very clear about what they want. It's time for governments, all levels of governments, to listen to families and give them what they need. They deserve closure. They have a right to have closure. And whatever that closure looks like, they need to be honored, and that needs to be provided.
Carrie, you're looking for closure. I mean, I lost my mom. I know exactly where she is. I visit her when I go home. You call for the chief of police to step down now. What do you do if police don't change, if they don't do this search in a landfill? I mean, how do you get to closure? Can you get to closure without that action?
If I can't shut down this landfill, then I believe that we should put something equally important in place for them, be it a sign, be it their own personal spot somewhere in the city where it can just be dedicated to these 4 women. And we can offer them things and we can say goodbyes, because no one wants to do that in the landfill, because that is not where they belong.
Cambria, why should the chief of police, in your view, resign?
I am in full support of the chief resigning. You know, I think what he's saying is a violation of my sister's and my human rights and my mother's human rights. And, you know, what they're saying and the way they're going about it is pretty demeaning. We have given them plenty of chances, you know, to meet and speak. And instead of becoming separate nations, we become one, like my sister has said. But they don't want to. They don't want to do the work. But, you know, nothing's impossible. So...
When I heard you both speak earlier today, I was struck by the phrase more unmarked graves. Right?
Yes.
I mean, what do you mean by that?
Well, the systemic oppression of Indigenous peoples has been going on for hundreds of years, and, you know, we know that. And the government has repeatedly failed our people in numerous ways, and we saw it start with residential schools. And, you know, we're still digging up unmarked graves today, and so... when I want to go visit my mother, they expect me to go visit the landfill and pay my respects. Like, that's wrong. That's absolutely wrong. So, once again, they're creating unmarked graves.
I mean, you've heard the excuses about clay and other things that have been dumped there. I believe garbage continues to be dumped there.
Yeah, they're still dumping.
I just wonder, what do you want them to do? Do you want them to stop using this landfill to do the full search? I mean, what do you want to see happen next?
First, I want them to try and do a full search. Try and give in everything that they can. Try and just find help, because they are saying that they don't have enough resources, enough technology to do it themselves. But if they don't, then why can't they seek help from other places? From the US maybe, where we know that they have the technology. They found someone in a landfill that is much larger than the one here, so why can't they do the same? And if they can't find them, then the next option would be to shut the landfill down. But if they can't do that, then it would be heartbreaking, because these women deserve to be found. They deserve to be honored. They deserve to pass on without knowing that they have been left behind in a place where all the trash belongs. Because we are not trash. We are human beings just like the rest of the world.
Leah Gazan, just where does your advocacy go from here? How do you push this forward?
Well, you know, last night in the House, we're supporting the calls of families to have immediate moratorium on the uses of the Prairie Green landfill. It is so violent that we know, and not just the Prairie Green landfill, but there has been numerous reports about Brady landfill, that they know that loved ones' remains are there, and they continue to throw garbage on a crime scene. Quite frankly, that is violence. That is violence where people can't even rest in peace. I think, you know, I certainly support, I mean, the families' calls, the community's calls. You know, the chief of police, you know, it seems like at this point, there is irreconcilable differences with the Indigenous communities. I want to support the calls of family, and I'm going to take my lead from family and women and survivors of violence. They deserve justice. They deserve closure. It is not up to me to determine what one needs to have closure. And, you know, Kera said it so eloquently. We are human beings. We need to start being treated like human beings, deserving of dignity and human rights. This is a human rights crisis. This is a life and death crisis. And this family deserves the respect and justice so that they can have closure with the many families across this country. So I support all calls coming from the AMC, coming from families. I will support whatever call they need, including a resignation, if that provides some closure.
Cambria, Kera, I hope you get your closure. And I want to thank you for sharing your story and telling us about your mom. So thanks so much for coming in today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leah Zan.
Thank you.
Okay, we want to take you to Winnipeg now, where Premier Heather Stephenson and Mayor Scott Gillingham are talking about this very case.
And I want to thank Premier Stephenson for joining me today. This morning I had a meeting with Diane Redsky and Bernadette Smith and Sandra Delarond, and one of the requests to me was that if we find a way to pause operations at the landfill site north of the city of Winnipeg, Prairie Green landfill. And so I called upon the Premier, because it's not in the city of Winnipeg, and I put a call into the Premier's office earlier today asking if she could assist with that. And I'm so pleased that in short order she's here today and is going to assist with pausing operations at that landfill. Really, it's to determine what the next steps may be, and that gives officials time to determine those next steps. I'm grateful that the arm of Rosser and the operator of that site are have been reached and are certainly willing to assist in any way. So, today's about the Premier and I coming together, the city and the province coming together to try to recognize the need that families have, and to work with Indigenous communities as well and Indigenous leaders to assist them in the next steps of this really horrific tragedy. So maybe I'll turn to the Premier at this time.
Sure. Thank you very much, Your Worship, and thank you for inviting me to City Hall to be here. The very important issue. This is something that I brought up earlier at the State of Province. It's an absolutely horrific tragedy that has taken place out there, and you know, our thoughts and prayers go out to the families of these victims. We have reached out as a government to Prairie Green, the owners and operators of Prairie Green, and reached out to the RM of Rosser. Both are very cooperative in our wanting to put a pause on anything moving forward from here while we take the time to work behind the scenes to see what else and what the next steps are, working with Indigenous communities to ensure that we get to the bottom of this. And so that will be the next steps. And you know, I'm just very grateful to the Mayor for inviting me here today and to be a part of this. And I think with the spirit of cooperation, everyone working together, I think this is what a very positive thing, I hope, for the families.